Chelek Yud Aleph, Shemos. We finished last week. We finished Chelek Yud. Now we're going back to Yud Aleph for a few more weeks till we get to Yud Shvat. Before I begin today's shiur, I would like to point out that this Sunday and Monday, going into Tuesday of Parshas Shemos, Yud Tes through Chav Teves, the project Likutei Sichos is holding a fundraiser, a charity campaign for the benefit of the project to be able to grow and continue. And we're asking everyone to be mishtatif, to support, so that we can be able to do what we have to do. As a matter of fact, there's even a page with our name on it. So the website is kibush.com, KIBBUSH.com. And you can go to kibush.com/Gourarie and you could contribute to our team page. The Rebbe says that we should be able to continue to learn together and give the Rebbe lots of nachas, and so that b'mheira v'yameinu mamish we could hear Torah Chadasha from the Rebbe himself. So the Sikha of Parshas Shemos is a very fundamental Sikha on the idea of b'chira, what it means to choose something, and the idea that when Mashiach comes, no Jew will be left behind, that every single Yid is going out of Galus. And this is how we get there. Ois Aleph. Ala posik vayemer Elokim al Moshe eya asher eya. Moshe, the Rebbe says to Moshe, I will be what I will be. I mean, there's very many ways to teach this pasuk, but in a simple way, I'll be whatever I'll be. Medrash says from Eyash is mashma that it's not automatic that the Eibishter is going to be the Eibishter. It's Eyash Eya. Though wherever I'll be, or to whomever I'll be. So the Medrash says, Amar Rabbi Yechanan Eya Lasher Eya biyichidim. This idea of Eyash Eya applies to individuals. Aval b'merubim, meaning to say that individuals could sort of choose if the Eibishter will be their Eibishter or not, as we'll see in the next paragraph. But in the masses, when you're talking about the collective Jewish people, al korcham shaloi b'tevasam kishehem mishubares shineyem melech ani aleim, against their will and against what they think is good for them, even if they break their teeth to fight it, I will be the king upon them. I will rule over them. Shenemar chai aninu Hashem elikim im loy b'yad chazaka em loy chalechem. Even if it takes a yad chazaka, I will be the king over them. So the Mefarshim explain what the Medrash is saying. When he says Asher Eya, Shema Shmoi, Dezeh She'eya Lelikim, Eini B'derech Echlet, Ubechol Oifen, Ela Asher Eya, that the understanding from the pasuk that I will be the Eibishter is not automatic and in any case, but it's only to certain situations, Asher Eya, wherever it will be. Le'elu She'eya Le'mepei Lelikim, I will be an Eibishter to those who I will actually be an Eibishter for. B'bchirasam uv'chevtzam, those who choose it and desire it. V'im lo yirtzu, implying that if a Yid chas v'shalom does not want the Eibishter, v'yodam lifrei kule, he has the ability to shed the yoke of the Eibishter. So this whole idea that the person can choose if he wants the Eibishter to be his Eibishter, this only applies to individuals, and an individual person could Rahman al-Islam choose that he doesn't want the Eibishter. Avol harabim, but if it's the Rabbim, if it's everyone together, I will not allow them to take off of themselves the yoke of Shamayim, the yoke of heaven. Even if they think to walk away from me, against their will, I will rule over them. And where do we see the practical application of this? Even though there were many wicked people amongst the Yidden in Mitzrayim, even though there was many, since the Yidden were merubim, since the Rishoyim that were by the Yidden were many, there was a whole group of them. Therefore, they couldn't, as a group, walk away from the Eibishter, and the Eibishter takes them out of Galus. What's the understanding in this? In other words, let's understand this a little bit deeper. The pasuk b'yod chazaka emlech aleichem, which is from the Navi Yecheskel, is said b'lashon asid in the future tense. Emlech, I will be the king over them, which implies that he's talking about what happens after Yecheskel, which are the geulos that came after Yecheskel, including the geula hasida, but seemingly excluding geulas Mitzrayim, which came before Yecheskel. Because nevertheless, it still hints also to the Geula of Mitzrayim. Which also the Geula of Mitzrayim was in this manner, that it was with a strong hand, meaning to say against their will. So also Geula of Mitzrayim was in a certain sense against the will of the Yidden, that even though they were Rishoyim, nevertheless the Eibusher took them out of Mitzrayim. But however, this idea that the Eibusher used his strong hand to force the Yidden out of Galus, this only forced the masses, the collective Klal Yisrael, out of Mitzrayim. But it wasn't strong enough to affect the individuals. As the Medrash says explicitly, that those Rishoyim that did not want to go out of Mitzrayim, they died in the 3 days of darkness during Makas Choshech, so the Mitzrayim shouldn't see that Yidden were dying. But they died and they were not able to go out of Mitzrayim. So it doesn't say this 100% clearly here, but from what I understand, is those Yidden that were Rishoyim, which means that they threw off of themselves the oil of the Eibishter. The Eibishter forced them, so to speak, and took them out of Mitzrayim. Those Yidden that did not want to go out of Mitzrayim, on that level, since they were Yechidim, they didn't want to go out of Mitzrayim, they therefore didn't go out of Mitzrayim. They just didn't take them out, and they remained in Mitzrayim, and they died in the Shleisha Simei. Okay, V'hinei. So what we've learned so far is that when it came to Geulas Mitzrayim, the merubim, the masses, the group were all taken out of Mitzrayim, because even though they may not have wanted to do so, the Eibishter continues to be Melech on the Yidden b'yod chazaka, even against their will. But Yechidim do have a choice to opt out, and those who opted out of going out of Mitzrayim were not forced to go out of Mitzrayim. Now, Hinei, Bashkafa Risheno Yav Shaleimar, Mikivan Shve Pasik Zeh, Im Levi Yad Chazaka Gemer Emelech Aleichem, Hamachuvan Legula Asida, Ve'amedrish Leim, Midmeno Shachas Leitzis Mitzrayim. So what happens in this Medrash is that even though the Pasik that's being used as a Raya is said with regards to the Gula Asida, nevertheless we're learning Gulas Mitzrayim from Gula Asida. We're learning the Yidden going out of Mitzrayim from the Gula Asida, that just like with the Gula Asida, everyone, the Merubim go out, so too by Gulas Mitzrayim also, the Merubim went out. Harei mi'idach, I would think, Bashkafa Rishayinam, for his glance, I would think that we could learn the same thing in the other direction. To learn from Gulas Mitzrayim to the Gula Asida. Yesh Lilmid, I would think that I could learn Binyan HaKosuv, Megulas Mitzrayim al Gula Asida, that which is said by Gulas Mitzrayim, also with regards to the Gula Asida, just like I'm learning from the Gula Asida to Gulas Mitzrayim, that the Merubim were forced out, so to speak. Let's learn in the other direction from Gulas Mitzrayim to Gula Asida. Hainu shegam hayad chazaka shebegula asida, that the yad chazaka, the fact that the Eibusher is going to force the Yidden out of Galus by gula asida, eina miyadas al merubim. Let's say that just like begulas Mitzrayim, it only affected the merubim, the masses. It didn't affect the individuals. So let's say the same thing applies to gula asida, that the Eibusher will take the Yidden out of Galus, but the Yechidim who choose not to go out, chas v'shalom, will not have to go out. Zay say meres. This would imply the promise of the Torah, that that you will return to the Eibishter. V'shav Hashem alekecha, and then the Eibishter will return everyone out of Galus. She Seif Yisrael Lasis Tshuva, which we learn from this pasuk, that in the end the Yidden will do tshuva, umiyadei negolin, and then they will be immediately to be taken out of Galus. So let's say that Nemra b'negel imerubim uleklal Yisrael, that it said with regards to the collective Jewish people, v'lei b'negel yichidim, but not with regards to yichidim. If a yachid insists on not doing tshuva, then he's not going to go out of Galus by the Gul Sida Chas v'Shalom. So I would think that just like I'm learning from the Gula Asida to Gulus Mitzrayim, I can learn back from Gulus Mitzrayim to Gula Asida. So now he's going to bring various different rayas that this is not true. And when it comes to the Gula Asida, every single Yid, even the Yechidim, even those who choose Kivayachal not to go out of Gulus, will go out of Gulus. And he brings a few rayas. We can't say this. As Rashi says clearly on the pasuk, "V'shav Hashem alekecha," that the Eibush is going to return the Yidden out of Galus. That Rashi says that it means every single individual. Rashi is he's going to grab with his hands each individual to look to le'echad echad b'nei Yisrael. He's going to collect one by one of the Yidden, take them out of Galus. V'harei havtochas ha'geula ve'ifana v'shav Hashem ba behem shlichu kimisuvav me'asiba shel ha'geula. The Shav Hashem, the fact that the Eibush is going to return the Yidden out from Galus to Eretz Yisrael, is coming as a outcome of the cause of the Geula, which is V'shavta Hashem alekecha, that the Yidden are going to do tshuva. Shesef Yisrael last is tshuva, Sef Galus, and the Yidden in the end are going to all do tshuva at the end of Galus. So V'meila, if V'shav Hashem alekecha is to each and every Yid individually, and V'shav Hashem alekecha is an outcome of V'shavta Hashem alekecha, of the Yidden's tshuva, and V'shagam bazeu kol echad echad b'frat, means that also when it comes to the tshuva, also every is going to do tshuva. So when he says Seif Yisrael last is tshuva miyadei negolin, this applies to every single Yid, that in the end every single Yid is going to do tshuva and is going to be taken out of Galus. V'chein kasvat murazakin, and this is what the Alter Rebbe writes in Hilchos Talmud Torah, shekol echad v'echad mi Yisrael, that every single Yid bivadai, for certain, Seif Elas is tshuva, is going to ultimately do tshuva. Kili yidachem enu nidach, as the pasuk says that nobody will be pushed away from the Eibush forever. So there's going to come a point in time where every single Yid is going to do tshuva. Obviously, this includes also the Rishoyim, even those who don't want to go out of Galus. They too will be awakened to do tshuva, and the Eibush will take them out of Galus. Because as the pasuk says very clearly, and that day the shofar is going to be sounded. Those who are lost in the land of Assyria, those who had been pushed away into the land of Mitzrayim, and they will all come together. They will all come, and they're going to bow down to the Eibishter. In the holy mountain Yerushalayim, what is this pasuk telling us? Even those that are so deeply immersed in their galus, they became lost and pushed away. And they have no desire to go out of Galus. They too will be awakened to do tshuva. To the point that they will come and they will bow down to the Eibush on the holy mountain in Yerushalayim. The fact that the other Yidden will come is obvious. This pasuk is telling us that even the Yovdim and even the Nidachim, Yovdim with an aleph, those who are lost, and even the Nidachim are going to come back. Implying that even the Rishoyim and even those who don't want to go out of Galus, they too are going to go out of Galus. And he brings one more raya. This is from the very famous, I don't know, very famous, but this is from the Rebbe's Pshat in the Haggadah. As was said numerous times, to explain what Chazal tell us. And the answer to the question of the Ben Rasha, the wicked son, in the Haggadah, where we say to him at the end of the paragraph, that if he had been there in Mitzrayim, he would not have been redeemed. Which is the classic question. What what is the necessity and what is the purpose of telling the Rasha something that is not connected to the Seder. The whole Seder is about Yitzis Mitzrayim. And if he's telling him, Eloi Hashem lo nigel, then what does that have to do with now? What does that have to do with the Seder? And the explanation is, the purpose here is not to push away the wicked son from the Seder and let him know that the Geula, that the redemption is beyond him. Quite the contrary. In the answer to him, we are emphasizing. There in Mitzrayim he would not have been redeemed. When it comes to the Geula Hasida with Mashiach, since it's after Mattan Torah, and we're going to address a little bit later in the Sikha what happened by Mattan Torah, but since it's after Mattan Torah, even he, even the Ben Rasha, even the wicked son, will go out of Galus, will be redeemed. So the purpose of telling this to him is to awaken him, is to inspire him to the incredible accomplishment of Mattan Torah. That's from the point when the Eibishter said, I am the Eibishter, in the single tense, to the individual, the Eibishter becomes the life force and the potency of every single Yid individually. Every Yid, even a Rasha like him, is guaranteed that because he has this keach of godliness within him, he ultimately will go out of Gos. So we see from these few proofs. Number one, where Rashi says to look to Lechadecha b'nei Yisrael, and from the Alter Rebbe says Mevadei Sefer Lasses Shuvim Kilayidach Menu Nidach, and the pasuk that says Avohevdim Be'eretz Asher Nidacham Eretz Mitzrayim, and from the Lashon and the Haggadah Eloi Hashem lo Nigel the Dafka Sham Mitzrayim, he wouldn't have been Nigel. But after Mattan Torah, now that we are after Mattan Torah, he will go out of Golus, because the Eibishter is his Eibishter has become one with who he is. So we see from here that the Yid, every single Yid, regardless of what he wants or doesn't want, regardless of what his state is in his level of righteousness, every single Yid is going to go out of Golus by the Geula Hasidah. The question that we're going to have now in Nois Gimel is, number one, why in Mitzrayim did it not work? Meaning to say, why in Mitzrayim were some left behind? And why by the Geula Hasidah is every Yid going to go out? Monoshach. What's the difference? We have to understand Aleph, two questions. Question number one, the reason why the Eibishter took the Yidden out of Galus is because, as its Parsha says, the Yidden are my firstborn son. We are the Eibishter's child. And I tell you, Shalach as Beni sent out my son so he could serve me in the Midbar. I knew because of this bond between our father, the Eibishter, and the children, and the Yidden, who are the Eibishter's children. It's understood that every single Yidden who was in Mitzrayim, even those on the lowest of levels, Yisrael is still included in the Eibishter's child. The bond of a parent and a child is natural and is inherent. And it can't be changed. As Chazal tell us, whether you are deserving of it, whether Yidden are doing mitzvahs or not, you're called children. You are the children of the Eibishter. Regardless of your conduct, you remain to be the child of the Eibishter. And therefore, the Eibishter cannot exchange us for another people, because you can't exchange a child. The child has your DNA inside of him or her. And therefore, even if the child doesn't conduct themselves the way you would expect them to or want them to, they remain to be your child, and therefore we are the Eibishter's child. And even if our conduct is unbecoming, it doesn't change the fact that we're the Eibishter's child, and therefore the Eibishter can't exchange us. He can't give us away and acquire a new child. The Kivan Shekain. And therefore, if the whole reason that we didn't go out of Gullus is because we're the Eibishter's child, and the Eibishter's child is not something that's transferable, in that case, why Taka did some Yidden remain behind? How, if they're the Eibishter's child, why were they not redeemed from Mitzrayim? Base, question 2. The Gullus Mitzrayim are Yokama Sugim Shel Rishayim. The Gullus Mitzrayim had various different categories or levels of Rishoim, of wicked people. They were even idol worshippers amongst the Yidden that were in Mitzrayim. But the Medrash says, even so much so that when they went out of Mitzrayim, according to this Rashi in Sanhedrin, the Yidden actually took a getchke with them. They took an idol with them, the Pesel Micha. Nevertheless, even the idol worshippers amongst the Yidden merited to go out of Mitzrayim. In that case, why is it that those who chose to not go out of Mitzrayim were not redeemed? In other words, seemingly their sin is much less. To serve Avodah Zarah is the worst thing to do. You could be a heilige Yid and not serve Avodah Zarah, but then you say, I don't want to go out of Mitzrayim, and you're stuck. Why is that considered the worst possible thing, that because of that, those people didn't go out of Mitzrayim, even worse than those who did other terrible things? In other words, we have to understand, what is this concept of Yidden not going out of Gulas Mitzrayim? In other words, in question Aleph, if we're the Eibishter's child, how did he leave us behind? And in question Beis, what is so terrible about not wanting to go out of Mitzrayim that is the cause for a Yid to be left behind in Mitzrayim? And in Eis Dalid, he's going to address this Nakuda. What happens when a Yid says, I don't want to go out of Mitzrayim? What does it do to the relationship between a Yid and the Eibishter? Dalet. So this will be understood by first explaining the idea of the kapara of Yom Kippur. In other words, Yom Kippur atones, it forgives for the sins that we've done during the year. So that's Rabbi's opinion in the Gemara in Yoma. He shall call Aveda Shabbatera ben Asatshuva ben Le'asatshuva Yom Kippur Mechaper. Any Aveda that a person did during the year, whether he did tshuva on the Aveda or whether he did not do tshuva on the Aveda, Yom Kippur, the very day of Yom Kippur, atones and forgives for those sins. Amnam, Meidei Rabbi, in the Gemara in Shavuos, where this discussion comes up, Rabbi agrees, but Kaddish Diyema. Kaddish Diyema means someone who breaks the day of Yom Kippur. Someone who transgresses one of the sins, one of the Avedas that are connected to Yom Kippur, like Chas v'Shalom, he ate on Yom Kippur. So Rabbi agrees that if he's over on the prohibition of Inui, of not doing, literally means torturing yourself or causing yourself pain by not eating, by not drinking, by wearing shoes or by bathing or anointing. Or a person who does malacha on Yom Kippur on the day itself. In other words, if a person does an Aveda during the year, it could be the worst Aveda, and it could be that the guy didn't do tshuva. Nevertheless, comes Yom Kippur Mechaper according to Rabbi. But when it comes to an Aveda, an Isser, that he went against Yom Kippur itself, Rabbi agrees that Yom Kippur cannot forgive him. And this raises this very similar question. Since Yom Kippur has the power to forgive on any Aveda, even the worst Aveda. Even very stringent, severe Avedas. Then what is it about Kaddish Diyema? What is it about these few Avedas that Yom Kippur cannot be mechaper? So the Rabbi Yosef Rosen, the Rogatchover Goin, explains this. To answer this question, he explains as follows: since the chet is related to Yom Kippur itself, Yom Kippur becomes the cause for the sin. Because if he ate yesterday or if he eats tomorrow, it wouldn't be a sin. Because he's eating today, it became a sin. So what caused it to be a sin? The fact that it's Yom Kippur. So Yom Kippur becomes the cause for this to be an Aveda. Im kain, I efsher shehagerim la'achet ugam mechaper alav. You can't have the same thing, the same concept, both cause the sin and forgive for the sin. The ein kateger nasas haneger, like the expression goes, the prosecutor cannot become the defender. Yom Kippur in this case is the prosecutor, because Yom Kippur is the one that caused him to sin. Meaning, he didn't cause him to eat, but he ate. Eating itself is not a bad thing. On Yom Kippur, it's a bad thing. So Yom Kippur is what made it into a sin. So being that Yom Kippur is the kateger, is what makes it into a sin, and therefore is the prosecution in this case, it cannot at the very same time be the defense. It cannot be mechaper while it's being goyre. That's in the lashon of nigla. Nigla the Torah. And to explain this, but using the lexicon, using the language of Chassidus. On Yom Kippur, it is revealed in every Yid the core bond of the neshama, of the soul with the Eibishter. On this level, the level of etzem neshama, of the bond of the neshama, the core bond of the neshama with the Eibishter, sin is not teifas makom. It doesn't. It's not important. It doesn't. It does. It's not. Doesn't register. In other words, on a lower level, a chet is a chet. When you talk about the core relationship of Yid and the Eibishter, it's higher than acknowledging the chet. So therefore, a person did chatoim, the person sinned during the year. On Yom Kippur, we say, 1 second, let's not look at the individual actions of the person. Let's look at the fact that this Yid is connected in a skashrus with the Eibishter. On that level, the chatoim are not acknowledged, are not recognized. Omnam bekar is the yema. But if a person went against Yom Kippur, the whole revelation of this bond came from Yom Kippur. If you're fighting that, if you're transgressing Yom Kippur itself, which means you're going against this very revelation of your bond with the Eibishter, at this point, this bond can't help you. It can't bring you to atone for the sin, because you need the hiskashrus. You need this bond in a revealed way. If you're concealing this bond by fighting with Yom Kippur, so to speak, then the bond becomes concealed again, and it can't help you to be mechaper on the chetva. So that's the idea of Yom Kippur. This is being brought in as a metaphor or as a parallel to the Gulas Mitzrayim. That by Yom Kippur, once we're megala the relationship of a Yid and the Eibishter, it's the most powerful thing in the world, and therefore it could be mechaper on any sin. It could forgive for any sin. The only thing it can't do is it can't defend itself if you're trying to actively deactivate this iskashus, or the gilui of this iskashus. You can't deactivate the iskashus because it's there. But it needs to come out in a revealed way, which Yom Kippur can do, unless you tell Yom Kippur, don't do it. Keep this iskashus away. And how do you do that? By fighting the day of Yom Kippur, by transgressing the day of Yom Kippur. And if that's what happens, then that hiskashrus, the gilui of that hiskashrus, becomes concealed, and nothing can happen. Let's take this idea and apply it now to Gulas Mitzrayim. The awakening and the revelation from above to take the Yidnat of Mitzrayim came because the bond of a Yidden with the Eibishter, our father, with the children, was revealed. Since it's an inherent, core level bond that cannot be changed, therefore it affected even the Rishoyim, even the wicked people. Because regardless of how they conduct themselves, they're still my children. And once you reveal and activate, so to speak, this bond, then everyone goes out. The exception was the Rishoyim that refused to go out of Mitzrayim. They chose that they want to be a servant to a servant. Which is the exact opposite of being a servant of Hashem. And certainly this is opposite of being the Eibishter's child. The Eibishter's child doesn't subjugate himself to another servant. So if a Yid chose to not go out of Mitzrayim, by doing so, they opposed the revealed bond, or revealing the bond with the Eibishter. This revelation was now defunct, was now unable to do its purpose because it was turned off by the Yid. And therefore it couldn't accomplish in that person the gula from Mitzrayim. Knal beis is the nikla dengatega nasas neger, using the words that we used previously, the katega, the prosecution, cannot become the defender. In other words, the Yid who is fighting the Gilui HaIskashrus of his connection with the Eibishter, that's a katega. You need that Gilui HaIskashrus to go out of Mitzrayim, to schlep you out of Mitzrayim. And if that Gilui HaIskashrus is turned off because the Yid says, I don't want to go out of Mitzrayim, then it doesn't do its job, doesn't do its function. And what happens is that the Yid doesn't go out of Mitzrayim. So our first question, our two questions that we asked in this Gimel, if the Yidden are B'nai B'cheri Yisrael, how do they not go out of Mitzrayim? The answer is that this connection of B'nai B'cheri Yisrael has to be in a Begilui. And that's what happened when the Eibishter came to take Yidden out of Mitzrayim. He was Megala, this iskashrus of the Yid of the Eibishter, and took them out of Mitzrayim, regardless of their conduct. Until a Yid came, and said, I'm not B'nai B'cheri Yisrael. I don't want to go out of Mitzrayim, even though it's not true. But nevertheless, because he was fighting that Gilui HaIskashrus, that revelation of the bond of the Yid with the Eibishter, therefore that was not able to fulfill its function anymore, and the Yid was not taken out of Mitzrayim. Now we're going to ask the question in reverse. In that case, why is the Gula Asida different? And we know that something changed. We know that by Mattan Torah something changed. By Mattan Torah, the Eibishter said, Hashem Elokecha, Kechacha v'chayuscha, that the Eibishter became the koyach, and the chay is the life force, the energy of every single individual on an individual level. And that certainly creates a stronger bond between the Yid and the Eibishter. But if a person fights it, how is the Gula Asida any different than Gulas Mitzrayim? And in order to do this, we're going to explore and uncover a whole new understanding in what actually happened in Mattan Torah, and what does it mean that the Eibishter chose us and we chose the Eibishter when it came to Mattan Torah. That's Ois Hey. We're going to learn Ois Hey, and it's going to be very special. Aval Adayin in the movement, it's still not understood. The desire or the will, the choice to not go out of Galos. Libni B'chei Yisrael, just like it contradicted the bond of the Eibishter with his firstborn, with Yidden, as his son, as his child, when it came to the Gula of Mitzrayim, which was before Mattan Torah. Seemingly it is also menaged gam la'iskasos va'yichud sheniteis of Mattan Torah. It also seems to contradict the bond and the oneness that occurs that was added on at Mattan Torah. By Mattan Torah, what was added, Shanechi Hashem Elekecha Kechacha V'chayuscha, that the Eibishter is Hashem Elekecha, your individual Eibishter, and your Kayach and your Chayis, your energy and your life force. Hamevi Ligula, some Avasidas of Yisrael, which would be what would bring about the Gula of the Yidden. Just like it's possible for someone to contradict the iskashrus, or to oppose, I should say, the iskashrus of the Yid with the Eibishter by Gulas Mitzrayim. You could do the same thing now. Eibishter can give it by Mattan Torah, and a Yid could oppose it. He could say, "Ich will nicht." According to this rule that we've mentioned before, that the prosecution cannot become the attorney, which means we can't use the very thing that is contradicting or opposing the Geula to actually bring the Geula. And if so, how will it be possible for those who don't want to go out of Galus to by the Gula Asida Chas V'Shalom to actually go out of Galus? What's going to change? Seemingly, you need this bond to be in operation, to be functioning, and if the Yid opposes the bond, then the bond ceases to function. It's there, but it ceases to function. And how's it going to work? So we're going to explain it to you. And here is the explanation. What happened by Mattan Torah, that because of that, even if a Yid chooses to oppose his bond with the Eibishter, it still will not affect him enough that he won't be able to go out of Galus. So we have to, in order to explain this, we have to first understand what happened by Mattan Torah. What changed by Mattan Torah that is so powerful that it will have an effect on every single Yid, even the Yid who doesn't want to go out of Galus by the Gula Asidah. In this chidush, in the novelty and in the advantage of the bond of the Eibishter and the Yidden, which was renewed, or which was introduced rather by Mattan Torah, something new happened at Mattan Torah that didn't exist before. We find two concepts, two ideas that are both related to what happened in Mattan Torah. Aleph, b'shas Mattan Torah, bachar HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Yisrael. During Mattan Torah, the Eibishter chose the Yidden. We're going to elaborate on this idea. The Eibishter chose the Yidden. And this actually has a practical application in halacha. The Alter Rebbe writes in Shulchan Aruch, when a person is saying Shachris in the morning, in the bracha of Avas Elam, and he says the words Uvanu v'charta mikolam v'loshen, he yizkir Mattan Torah, he should think about Mattan Torah, he should remember Mattan Torah, because Uvanu v'charta, when did that happen? It happened to Mattan Torah. The Mattan Eibishter gave the Torah to the Yidden, that happened to the Bechira, the Eibishter choosing the Yidden base. The second thing that happens in Mattan Torah is Bnei Yisrael nasu mishubadim va'avodim l'Hashem. The Yidden became mishubadim, subjugated, or in Yiddish, I would say, Ibergegem. Va'avodim la'Hashem, they became servants of the Eibishter. They gave themselves away to become the Eibishter's servants. U'kumaymer azah, the Chazal tell us, with regards to the Martzeya, to the fact that if a Yid says he wants to stay an Eved, wants to stay a servant more beyond the 6 years that are allotted to him, he said, Chazal say, Oizen sheshama al Sinai kilibna Yisrael avodim avadayim. The ear that heard on Har Sinai, the Eibishter said that Yidden are my servants. Avadayim, they are my servants. which means that by Har Sinai is when this Avodah aim happened. And like it says with regards to Mattan Torah in our parsha, Shemos, the Rebbe says to Moshe Rabbeinu, when you will take the Yidden out of Mitzrayim, you're going to serve the Lashon Tavdun, you're going to become Avodim to the Eibishter at this mountain. Which means what happened in Mattan Torah is, besides the fact that the Eibishter was Bachar, chose the Yidden as his Yidden, as his people, the Yidden chose the Eibishter. Doesn't use the word Bechira here. But the Yidden dedicated, committed themselves to be the Avodim of the Eibishter. And we're going to see soon how these two ideas, the Eibishter choosing us and we becoming the Eibishter's Avodim, are actually interconnected. They're intertwined. So now we have to elaborate a little bit to understand what does it mean that the Eibishter chose us, and what was so special about it. I mean, the Yisrael is Kadmal Torah. Even before the Eibishter gave the Torah, the Yidden were already in the Eibishter's Machshava, and the Yidden were already, the whole reason the Eibishter created the world was for the Yidden and for Torah. Which means Yidden exists before the world was created, which means Yidden exists before Mattan Torah. So what happened in Mattan Torah? What's shot that the Eibishter was beicher in the Yidden? Oh. This is really, to be fair and honest, this is a very lofty concept. This whole discussion of Bechira is a very deep idea in Chassidus and discussed at length in many places, and sometimes as much as you'll delve into it, there's layers upon layers that you can go deeper. What we're going to try to do here is keep it on the basic level so we could understand the nekuda, the point that's being made here in the Sikha as to what happened at Mattan Torah to enhance and create this new bond between the Yid and the Eibishter. Hine Eizvav. Hachidish v'hayisrid. This chiddush, this novelty, this novel concept, and this advantage, this greatness, this uniqueness in the bond between a Yid and the Eibishter, because the Eibishter chose the Yidden over the pre-existing bond that the Eibishter has with Yidden, that he is their father and we are his children. Yuvan me'inyan ha'bechira l'adam lamata. Will be understood by understanding the whole concept of choice from the human being on this physical earth. Re'im b'chush. We see physically. When a person makes a choice, chooses something. This desire, this will, is more intense than a natural desire that he has to something. In other words, just to explain this in a few extra words, a person has seichel, has intellect. A person has feelings, emotions. These things lead him to want and desire certain things. And to a certain degree, the person doesn't get to choose what his nature is. Nature is nature. So therefore, if my nature desires a certain thing, I'm going to want it. Then there are certain things that I want not because my nature says I want it. There's something deeper, illogical, in the gut, that I want this. I want this not because it makes sense, not because I like it, not because I want it. I want it on a level that's beyond anything that my nature or my built-in personality might have wanted to choose. So in a certain sense, those things that I chose because it's my nature, that was natural. That was a natural reaction to who I am. And therefore, on the one hand, I don't even have a choice to choose it. It's who I am. On the other hand, the intensity of that desire is only going to be as strong as my personality has a desire to that. But if I choose something not because of my personality, I choose something from a place deep, deep inside of me that's beyond anything, it doesn't even make sense. And it doesn't even have no explanation. It's not connected in any way, shape, or form to who I am or what my natural state of desire is. Then first of all, it's a real choice. Because there was no other circumstance that brought me to make this choice, and at the same time, the intensity is infinite because it's not based on anything. It's not based on other than on the etzem, on the gut, on the core being of the person. So let's see this inside. When a person chooses something, this desire is much more intense than a natural desire to certain things. And the reason is, what is a person's nature? The ramifications of his personality, of his being. And because of this nature, this is how his faculties and his abilities, his talents are structured within him, based on his nature. A person has a nature, let's say, that he's a marash chayra, he's a reserved individual, then he's going to be more studious and less social, because that's his nature. And therefore, if you say, what does he want? He wants to be away from people, and he wants to learn. He wants to read, he wants to educate himself. A person who's a social being, and ask him what he wants to be around people. So therefore, when a person wants something, because that's his nature, then basically he will only, the intensity of what he wants is only as intense as his personality is. So whatever his personality is, that's how much he's going to want this, not more than that. Because where is the ratzon coming from? It's coming from his nature. So as strong as the nature is, that's how strong the ratzon is. But when you talk about choice, a person is choosing something. In other words, it's not really a choice if it's my nature. It's just who I am. It's just how I was created. When you say I'm choosing something, that means it's coming from my essence, from my core. Beyond the ramifications or the limitations or the structure of the individual person's nature. And here is in the brackets, he elaborates on this. True choice is when there's no reasons, no causes leading up to the choice. It doesn't have tendencies or leanings to choose the specific thing. He's choosing it freely. The second a person chooses something because it's his nature, it's not a free choice. It's a choice that is dictated by his personality or nature. When you say that a person chooses means that there's nothing that is pushing him or coercing him to make this choice. This means that there's nothing that the real choice is when it's coming from the etzem. Should have finished these three lines. But when a person chooses something because of his nature, nature also includes tzir, also includes the expression of his nature, his intellect and his emotions, his kaiches. So when a person chooses something because of his nature, because of his personality, or because of his makeup, the person that he is, his seichel and his midas, then he's almost forced, because this is his nature. So what is bchira amitis, true choice, is when it's not coming from anywhere other than from the essence. As we see when it comes to actual choice, that a person can make a choice and choose something that naturally he doesn't even want, that naturally he wouldn't make such a choice, because choice is not based on nature. Choice is not based on the natural consequences of who the person is. Choice comes from the essence. And therefore, this is where we were working our way up to, all the way here. And therefore, when a person chooses something because it's his personality, then he wants it. As much as his personality is, that's how much he wants it. Not more than that. But when a person chooses something because it's coming from his bechira, it's coming from his free choice that's deep in the essence of who he is, because it's coming from the essence of the person, therefore, it is the most intense type of desire, and therefore the bechira is so much more powerful than ratzon. Or the ratzon of bechira is so much more powerful than the ratzon that it comes mitzad the teva, mitzad the nature of the person. Now let's use this as a mashal to our relationship with the Eibishter, and think about it like this. We just explained that a desire that comes from the person's nature is not nearly as intense as a desire that comes from the essence, because the desire that comes from the nature is something that he's compelled to do. It's 2 points. Number one, he's compelled by his nature to desire this. And number two, the desire can only go as strong, only be as intense as the nature is. So in that case, if you think about the ava of an avu ben, that is the love between a parent and a child, which usually we often use it to describe the most intense form of love, because it's not changeable, because it's impossible to ever give up on it. But on the other hand, the ava, the love of a parent and a child is natural. It's coerced. You have to love your child because he's your child. It's automatic. And therefore, because it's forced, so to speak, it lacks a certain intensity that a bechira from the etzem, that a choice that is not based on natural causes, a choice that is not based on any external reasons, will be much more intense. The love and the desire that the Eibishter has for Yidden mitzad Yesem ban Almakim, because they are his children of Vinu, and the Eibishter is our father, who kein kiviyachol ratzon v'ava shalav lebnai, is similar to kiviyachol. Obviously, it's talking about an Eibishter here, so we can only use a mashal of a parent and a child, but the mashal is like a father and a son. Which means to say the bond is based on a specific description, on a specific definition. And that's what happened till Mattan Torah, that there was an ava of the Eibishter to the Yidden because we are the Eibishter's child, but because of that, the ava was defined by the definition of this ava ben, of the father, of the fact that it's a parent-child relationship. So when you're talking about Mattan Torah, that the Eibishter chose the Yidden, the bechira, the choice comes from the core essence of the chooser, which is beyond any definitions or ramifications or descriptions. This desire for the Yidden and this bond with the Yidden is coming from the etzem, atzmus umuhus of the Eibishter, hamushval mikol terim, which is totally beyond any description. And if you remember, we said earlier that the two nekudas, the Eibishter choosing us and we becoming avodim, are intertwined. So now that we understand that something happened in Mattan Torah that didn't exist before, and that is that the bond of the Eibishter with Yidden went beyond Avu Ben, beyond the bond of parent and child, father and son, and went to the bond of a bechira that came from the etzem of the Eibishter, the atzma atzmusa yimusa, that's beyond any descriptions. This advantage, this uniqueness, Paul Gam, by his kashrus to bnei Salakas Baruch Hu Shalach Mattan Torah. This affected the connection of the Yidden to the Eibishter. That the relationship of a Yid back to the Eibishter, the reciprocal relationship, is not just based on who they are naturally, that they are children of the Eibishter. Ki mitzad atzmuslim, it should come from a deeper place from their core essence. And this is what happened to the Yidden b'Mattan Torah, that they also should be not just children of the Eibishter, but servants of the Eibishter. In this case, servants is a higher level than children. The level of the relationship of a parent and a child is one level, which usually, or I shouldn't say usually, sometimes we focus on that this is the closest you could be because it's your child. But Chassidus explains that there's also a relationship of Eved. And in a certain sense, Eved is higher than Ben. The relationship of a servant to a master is higher than the relationship of a parent to a child, of a child to a parent, or vice versa, because it is chosen. Because the Eved chooses and commits himself to be an Eved. As it is explained at length, in Hemshich Tafrei Samachvav, in the Mamorim of the Rebbe Rashab, in the differentiation and the difference between the level of serving Hashem as a son and serving Hashem as a servant. The son serves Hashem as if it's his nature. Just like it is the nature of the child to yearn, to be drawn to his father, with a great love and a full, complete aveda chulu. So similarly is the level of neshamas that's called children of the Eibishter. It is their nature, or like their nature, to be drawn to the Eibishter, with a passionate, flaming fire love, and to serve Hashem. But the downside is that this is not something that's coming from their own accomplishments and by their own choice, because they are children, and therefore they have this automatic, built-in, natural love and desire and passion to serve Hashem. And therefore he's not called an Eved. It's not called avodah, it's not called serving Hashem, because it's coming naturally. But when you're talking about the service of a servant, it's not coming from a built-in nature. On the contrary, serving his master is opposite his nature. The servant wants to go free, wants to run away, wants to do his own thing. And nevertheless, he on his own, and with his own powers, his own potential, he's kasher, has bonded himself, connected himself, and given himself away to serve Hashem. So much so that he loses his entire existence, his entire entity. And for himself, he's nothing. And his whole existence is the existence of the master. I believe in the Hamshech Samachvav, he says that his enjoyments are the enjoyments of the master. When the master is enjoying something, he enjoys what the master is enjoying. Not that he eats it also and enjoys it. The very fact that the master has a tainug, that is his tainug. This is a much greater and more intense love and connection than, well, not love. I don't think he uses the word love here, but a much greater connection than that of the ben, because the ben it comes naturally. It's not a choice, and if it's not a choice, then it only goes as far as the nature of it allows. Masha Enkin the Eved makes the choice. Where did the Yidden get the koyach to make such a choice? To give themselves over, to be mishabed themselves, to subjugate themselves, and to shed their entire existence and become the existence of their master, the Eibishter. That's because the Eibishter chose them by Mattan Torah. That's how those two things are connected to each other. The Eibishter was Beicher. The Eibishter chose us, Yidden, in a b'chira that's beyond Avu Ben. which is not a b'chira because it's b'teva nafshim. And because of that, this caused that the Yidden should go beyond this relationship of Avu Ben and serve the Eibishter like an Eved, which comes from their own choice, and therefore has a much greater intensity. So now we understand what happened in Mattan Torah. Mattan Torah, the relationship of a Yid and the Eibishter went way beyond what it was until then. Till then it was limited. It was mugbal because it was mukhrich, because it was coerced. It was automatic. And therefore, whatever it was programmed, that's as far as it can go. But it couldn't go beyond how it was programmed. But when it came to Mattan Torah, the Eibishter went beyond that. And therefore the hiskashrus, the bond is infinite. And because of that, this gives the Yidden the kayach to also go to an infinite level of connection and to serve the Eibishter on the level of Eved. Now we're going to go back and understand the difference between Gulas Mitzrayim and the Gula Asida. And now we'll understand the difference that by Golus Mitzrayim, those who did not want to go out of Mitzrayim did not go out of Golus, since they opposed the revelation of the bond of our Father in heaven, to the fact that the bond to us, his children. Which that bond is what caused and accomplished the Yitzhiyah, the going out of Mitzrayim. And if you oppose that very bond, then you can't expect that bond to work to take you out of Mitzrayim. And how that is different from the Gula Asida, which then, by the Gula Asida, every single Yid will go out of Golos, even those who don't want to go out of Golos. Even though this too is seemingly in contradiction to the revelation of the canal, which is the source of the Gula Asida, like we said before, with regards to the Ben Rasha. That we tell them that Ilu Yashom Lo Yanigel, because it was before Mattan Torah. But after Mattan Torah, where Anechi Hashem Alekecha, therefore even the Rasha will go out of Golos. Why? If the person doesn't want to go out of Golos, seemingly he's opposing Anechi Hashem Alekecha. He's contradicting the bond that he has with the Eibishter. So how does it work? Now that we understand, but now we could understand it very, very, very clearly. By the Golos Mitzrayim, where the bond of the Yidden with the Eibishter, because they are the Eibishter's children, he mitzad teva is a natural bond, meaning to say it's an automatic bond. A Yid has power of choice, and choice is more powerful than the natural connection, and therefore he could choose to opt out, so to speak, of the natural connection and say, I don't want it. Because his choice comes from his essence, his core, which is beyond the ramifications, beyond the limitations of his nature, and therefore his b'chira is more powerful. So if a Yid makes a b'chira to not go out of Galus, then that's more powerful than the natural relationship he has with the Eibishter, and then that relationship ceases to function. And therefore this bond didn't help to take them out of Mitzrayim because they overrode it. Their b'chira chavshis overrode their innate, natural bond with the Eibishter. After the Eibishter chose the Yidden at Mattan Torah, this bond came from the Eibishter's choice. It came from the core essence of the Eibishter. This impacted that the Yidden, that their bond back to the Eibishter should also be from their core essence. And therefore it encompasses their entire entity, because their atzmos is infinite, and therefore it encompasses their entirety. So once the Yid made a bchira, a choice to choose the Eibishter, and because he chose the Eibishter, with his entire being, he can't go back on that. He can't rescind that. Because his very essence, his very existence, and his entire existence chose the Eibishter. And the fact that externally he doesn't want to go out of Golus, this now becomes opposite of who he actually is. Who he actually is the one who chose the Eibishter. So the fact that now he doesn't want to go out of Golus, that's already an external additive to who he is in his core essence, which is someone who chose the Eibishter with entire existence, and he can't go back on that. And therefore it's understood that a Yid by Mattan Torah made such a powerful choice that he is intrinsically and internally and entirely connected with the Eibishter. It's understood, says Sof, that in the end, subsequently, this choice that he made will ultimately be revealed. He's going to choose the Eibishter as his portion and as his lot. Even in a revealed sense, means even the Yid right now screaming, I don't want to go out of Golus, I'm happy where I am. Even someone who says this, it's not really him. It's not really who he is. Who is he? He's a Yid who chose the Eibishter, and by definition wants the Geula. And against that's who he is, ultimately that will be revealed. That he's going to choose the Eibishter, and he's going to choose the Eibishter as his portion and his lot, even in a revealed way. And as the Alter Rebbe says it, as the Rambam says it, and then ultimately, every single Yid, last his tshuva, is going to do tshuva, b'seif golus, at the end of golus, and immediately they will be taken out of golus, every single Yid, may it be b'meheirav yameinu mamash.